So, in this video, we are going to have a look at the entire journey of Rudeus Greyrat, and you guys will get to know how Rudeus fought Orsted and other strong enemies in the future. What was the outcome of his future battles, and how strong does he get as the story progresses? So now without wasting any more time, let's start this video. So few months after Paul's tragic death, Rudeus got married to Roxy, and one day Rudeus falls asleep and then sees Hitogami in his dream once again. Hitogami reveals to Rudeus what would have happened if Rudeus had followed his previous advice. He says Paul would still be alive, but Roxy and Rudeus would not be married. Rudeus would have been married instead to Rinia and Persena. After this, Hitogami ends their encounter by requesting that Rudeus go check on his home's basement. Due to all the tragic events that happened in his life, Rudeus is more trusting of Hitogami at this point, and agrees to do what Hitogami said. So Rudeus then wakes up, and as Rudeus is about to leave his room and check the basement, he sees an old man sitting on a chair who introduces himself as Rudeus from the future. So the old Rudeus from the future stated that he arrived here by past teleportation magic. He warned Rudeus that if he were to go to the basement, as per Hitogami's instructions, it would trigger a chain of events that would cause a mouse to infect Roxy with magic stone disease, which causes one to slowly turn into a rock and then die. He reveals that killing Roxy is apparently part of Hitogami's plan. Then old Rudeus also explains that Hitogami will also somehow manipulate events so that Princess Ariel would return to Asura to start her revolt, and Sylphie to follow Ariel, which would lead to her death in battle. Old Rudeus also advises present Rudeus to forgive Eris and reform his connection with her, and send a letter to her in the Holy Land of Swords. Old Rudeus also advises present Rudeus to be skeptical of Hitogami, but to avoid direct confrontation with him. His third piece of advice was for Rudeus to consult with Nanohoshi. After giving the above advice, old Rudeus gives present Rudeus his diary from the future, and then dies due to the injuries that he got while traveling back in time. So after old Rudeus dies, present Rudeus then cremates him, and buries his remains next to his father's. He then goes to the basement and confirms that the mouse that would infect Roxy with the magic stone disease is present there. So Rudeus kills the mouse, and plans to send the mouse's corpse to the Magic Guild to be studied. After this, Rudeus remains unable to go to sleep, and so he begins to write a letter to Eris. Later, Rudeus reads the diary from his future self, which described the events that will happen if he listens to Hitogami's advice. He reads that Roxy became infected with magic stone disease, which was identified by Cliff and his Eye of Identification. Her disease can only be healed with God-rank detoxification magic. So Cliff, Zenoba, and Rudeus go to the Holy Kingdom of Milas, using teleport magic circles to get the book with God-class detoxification spells. Unfortunately, this book is within a cathedral that cannot be entered unless you are Archbishop level. So they decide to steal the book, but they are caught. Cliff dies during the battle, and the magic teleporting circle that they used to get there gets destroyed. They also become wanted men in the Milas region. By the time Rudeus and Zenoba arrive home, Roxy was already half crystallized and had died. Elinalise is informed of Cliff's death, and she leaves town while being heavily pregnant. Rudeus then becomes depressed due to Roxy's death, and begins neglecting Sylphie. Sylphie then leaves with Ariel, who has returned to the kingdom of Asura. Rudeus later decides to chase after Sylphie by following her to Asura. During his travels, he frequently runs into Eris, and she is unable to properly express her feeling towards Rudeus, and so she just beats him. Rudeus discovers that Ariel has returned to Asura in order to gather an army to perform a coup. However, this fails, and so Ariel, Sylphie, and Luke all die. Rudeus continues to read the diary from his future self, which described the following events. After Sylphie's death, Rudeus spent more time going to brothels. He also frequently ran into Eris, who also was living in Sharia. Rudeus continues to have mixed feelings about Eris. The Milas Church put a bounty on the heads of Rudeus and Zenoba, due to their exploits in stealing the God-class detoxification magic book. Then months later, Zenoba completes his automaton research, and he is able to create essentially a robot that looks like Sylphie, and acts like her as well. But Rudeus ends up destroying this robot, and he develops a deep hatred for Hitogami. He vows to get stronger in order to kill Hitogami, and throughout this process, he loses touch with his family. Only Aisha stays in touch with him. So to augment his physical strength, he and Zenoba develop full body armor similar to his prosthetic hand, which Rudeus can augment with magic to improve his physical strength. So future Rudeus continues to work on his magic over the years, developing gravity magic, electricity magic, and voice magic. However, he becomes a bad person, and he would frequently get into arguments, do whatever he wanted, and occasionally rape women. Rudeus continued to run into Eris, and so he begins to falsely suspect that she is affiliated with Hitogami. Rudeus continues to try to gather more information about Hitogami by questioning beings who are long-lived. He ends up trying to speak to a Tofei but ended up fighting her and her Imperial guards. During the battle, he becomes careless and in the end is saved by Eris. But then Eris is killed as a result. So after Eris's death, Ghislaine explains to Rudeus that Eris has loved him all this time and had followed him around for this reason. Ghislaine also blames Rudeus for Eris's death. Then years pass, and Zenoba dies. He is killed by the order of the temple. Julie, Ginger, and Aisha are killed as well. So with this, Rudeus no longer has any living loved ones. There was no mention in the diary of the fate of Lucy, Norn, or Lilia. So through his travels, Rudeus discovers the nature of this world, which is that it is shaped like a cube, with 6 sides and consists of the Dragon World, Human World, Demon World, Beast World, Ocean World, and Sky World. He learns that inside their world is the Void World, where Hitogami resides. So Rudeus learns that in order to travel to the Void World, one must collect the 5 ancient dragon race treasures. However, collecting all 5 treasures turns out to be impossible within his lifespan. So instead of that, Rudeus learns how to travel to the past, and he decides to go to the past to correct his mistakes. And this is the point where the diary of the future Rudeus ends. So after finishing reading his future self's diary, Rudeus has a discussion with Sylphie and Roxy. He vaguely reveals that someone has shown him the future in which a bad person would cause terrible things to happen to his family. Rudeus then broaches the subject of adding Eris to their polygamous relationship. Sylphie and Roxy initially object, since they know that Eris broke Rudeus's heart, which resulted in his erectile dysfunction. But Rudeus reassures them that he now knows that this was actually a misunderstanding, and both Sylphie and Roxy tentatively agree to accept Eris, depending on how well Rudeus's and Eris's are able to reconcile in their meeting together. Later, Rudeus falls asleep, and he sees Hitogami in his dream. Hitogami is initially extremely frustrated at the fact that future Rudeus has disrupted Hitogami's plans to kill Rudeus's family. Hitogami reports that Orsted is trying to kill Hitogami, but he cannot do it alone. However, Rudeus and his descendants are not affected by Orsted's curse, which causes all beings to hate Orsted. This means that Rudeus's descendants may end up assisting Orsted in killing Hitogami, which would destroy the world. Furthermore, Rudeus and his descendants have a strong fate, which means that Hitogami has difficulty manipulating their fate. So, because Rudeus and his descendants have strong fates, and they may end up helping Orsted to kill Hitogami, Hitogami tries to kill Rudeus's descendants to prevent his own ultimate death. Rudeus tells Hitogami that he will do anything for him if he is able to save his family. Therefore, Hitogami suggests that if Rudeus wants to save his family, he needs to kill Orsted. So Rudeus then wakes up, and he vows to kill Orsted to save his family from Hitogami. Rudeus then consults with Nanahoshi, in accordance with his future self's instructions. He tells her everything about his future self's encounter and his dream with Hitogami. After spending the day reviewing the diary and thinking, Nanahoshi discusses her hypotheses with Rudeus, which stated that Rudeus and Nanahoshi were transported into this world by someone whose goal is to kill Hitogami. Nanahoshi was transported so that she may create some currently unknown method to kill Hitogami, while Rudeus was transported so that his descendants and Orsted could kill Hitogami with that method. Nanahoshi then suggests to Rudeus that he team up with Orsted instead of fighting or trying to kill him, but Rudeus refuses, since Hitogami is unreachable, while Orsted is within this world. He reasons that for the purpose of protecting his family from Hitogami, it would be easier to kill Orsted than to kill Hitogami himself. Rudeus then begs Nanahoshi to help him kill Orsted. She is reluctant at first because Orsted has saved her in the past, but she ultimately agrees to help him. So on the other side, Eris gets ready to leave the Holy Land of the Sword to meet up with Rudeus in Renoa, with who she hasn't been in contact for many years. But just prior to departing, she receives a letter from Rudeus. The letter describes how Rudeus initially thought Eris had rejected him, but he now knows this was a misunderstanding and that she actually loves him. Rudeus informs Eris in this letter that he currently has 2 wives, but is willing to accept Eris as his 3rd wife. After reading this, her 2 friends argue over whether Rudeus is an asshole or not. Rudeus's letter also included a postscript, which states that he plans to challenge Orsted to battle, with the caveat that he may not survive that battle. Eris becomes excited after reading this, and she and Ghislaine head off toward Rudeus. Meanwhile, Rudeus works on his preparations to kill Orsted. He works on creating full-body magic armor, with the help of Zenoba and Cliff. He decides that he needs to find a suitable partner to fight Orsted. Bodigadi was missing, Rudyard wasn't present, and Perugius refused. He rules out Zenoba, Cliff, and Elena Lise, since they are his friends. He considers begging Eris to help fight if she were to arrive in time. So he puts the subject of finding a partner on hold for now, and instead of that, Rudeus considers various battle tactics to take down Orsted, including using traps and sneak attacks. During these preparations, Hitogami reappears to Rudeus in his dreams. Hitogami is quite pleased with Rudeus's decision to try to kill Orsted, but he warns him that he will wipe out Rudeus's family if he fails. Hitogami offers advice on building the magic armor and suggests that Rudeus use magic tools in his fight. Hitogami again confirms that he cannot see Orsted's future, but can see his own, and so he sees that in the future, he is killed by Orsted and Rudeus's descendants. Rudeus gets Hitogami to promise that if he kills Orsted, Hitogami will leave Rudeus and his family alone. Soon a month passes, and the magic armor construction is making good progress. It stands 3 meters tall, which is much larger than the armor that future Rudeus created for himself. By making the armor bigger, the engineering was easier, and it was more robust. Rudeus also goes shopping with Roxy to buy magic tools. He comes up with an idea to combine the same tool together, so that he can fire off his stone cannons in rapid succession like a Gatling gun. They enlist the help of a craftsman to help make this tool. Rudeus then consults with Nanahoshi. They come up with the idea of using poison, and they also come up with a plan to lure Orsted. Using Ariel's connections, Rudeus buys the poison that he plans to use against Orsted. Rudeus chooses his planned battleground against Orsted and practices using traps. He also learns close-quarters combat from Elinalise. Another month passes, and the magic armor is complete. It is 3 meters tall, and he wears it like a mecha suit. It has a Gatling cannon installed on one hand that fires stone cannons. The other hand has a magic-absorbing stone, and the armor is also equipped with a shield. Soon, Elinalise reveals that she is pregnant with Cliff's child, and Cliff confirms this for himself with his identification eye. Rudeus then tests out the magic armor by sparring with Sylphie and Zenoba. Sylphie's magic and Zenoba's punches are ineffective against the armor, and Rudeus is quite pleased with the armor. Back at home, Roxy announces to the family that she is pregnant, and the whole family congratulates her. Rudeus notes that this was a stark contrast to the atmosphere when Lilia revealed her pregnancy due to Paul's infidelity many years ago. His little sister Aisha reveals that she has successfully cultivated rice in their garden, and Rudeus is excited at the idea of being able to eat rice regularly. The family then enjoys their dinner in celebration. After dinner, Rudeus informs his family that he will be fighting a strong opponent without specifically naming Orsted, and that his preparations for the past few months have been leading to this. He warns them that there's a chance he may not survive. Later that evening, Rudeus explains the whole situation to Roxy and Sylphie. He explains that he plans to fight Orsted, and that if he fails to kill Orsted, his family will be in danger. Sylphie and Roxy promise to protect their family, and accept the fact that Rudeus will be fighting the dragon god Orsted. Soon, when his preparations are complete, they move according to their plan, and Orsted is lured into a deserted village by Nanahoshi. Their Orsted is pricked by a poisoned handle, and Rudeus triggers a trap inside a building. Rudeus then follows up with a barrage of long-range magic attacks, including a massive explosion like a nuclear bomb. But despite all this, Orsted takes minimal damage. Orsted then closes the distance between himself and Rudeus. Rudeus is able to do some damage to Orsted with his sword because its force increases exponentially proportional to the enemy's defense. But Orsted is then able to cut off both of his armor's arms off, including Rudeus's right arm. Orsted continues to damage Rudeus and his armor. Rudeus then ejects himself from the magic armor and the armor is destroyed. Outside of the armor, Rudeus is quickly defeated and seriously injured. Before killing Rudeus, Orsted questions Rudeus regarding why he came after him. Rudeus explains that Hitogami told Rudeus that his descendants would help Orsted kill Hitogami, which would destroy the world. Rudeus further explains that if he kills Orsted, Hitogami will spare Rudeus's family. Rudeus then crawls to Orsted's legs and begs that he give up on killing Hitogami. Orsted refuses, and so Rudeus bites Orsted's leg with the intention of launching a magical suicide attack. But Orsted uses Disturb magic and kicks him away. Before Orsted can kill and finish off Rudeus, Eris suddenly appears. So actually, a few days prior to Orsted and Rudeus's battle, Eris and Ghislaine arrived in Sharia City, and they find Rudeus's home and meet his family. Eris then finds out that Rudeus has headed off on his own to kill Orsted. After Orsted and Rudeus's battle had commenced, Eris and Ghislaine are able to locate them by the sounds of battle, and by seeing a large explosion. Eris finds Rudeus just as he is on the verge of death. Eris faces Orsted while she leaves Ghislaine to tend to Rudeus. Eris notes that Rudeus has been able to inflict a significant amount of damage on Orsted. Despite this, looking at Orsted, Eris recognizes that she is unable to defeat him alone. Orsted comments in surprise that Eris is risking her life for someone other than Luke, who was apparently fated to be her husband. But Eris responds that she doesn't know of anyone with that name. While fighting, Eris thinks back to her last meeting with the sword god, where he offered her one of 3 swords before she departed. She chose the Phoenix Elegant Dragon Sword, which has the ability to negate one's opponent's battle aura defense, or at least weaken it. The sword god also gives a piece of advice for her confrontation with Orsted, which was to never move first, because of his strong counterattack due to his proficiency in Water God's sword style. As Orsted and Eris face off, Orsted is surprised at the fact that Eris doesn't approach to attack. He comments that the Eris in front of him is different than the Eris he knows. Eris and Orsted then fight with Eris, remembering other bits of advice that the sword god Gulfarian gave her regarding fighting Orsted. Eris was able to cut off Orsted's hand, but he quickly reattaches it and heals the rest of his injuries from his battle with Rudeus. Eris then transitions from sword god style to North god style and throws a secondary sword at Orsted, which is easily repelled. At this point, Rudeus stands up with his injuries healed, but he's drained and near death. Roxy and Sylphie also arrive to support him. Eris and Sylphie then plan to fight Orsted, while having Rudeus escape with Roxy and Ghislaine. Seeing this, Orsted then declares that he cannot allow Rudeus to live while he is allied with Hitogami. However, he does note that Rudeus can potentially be useful with his magic armor, his immense magical power, and his immunity to Orsted's curse. Therefore, Orsted offers Rudeus to betray Hitogami and join him. Orsted states that with his power, he should be able to protect Rudeus and his family from Hitogami, but he is not able to give any absolute promises. So after hearing his offer, Rudeus agrees to join Orsted to be his subordinate. So Orsted heals Rudeus as promised, and both his missing upper limbs are regrown. Orsted gives him a magic bracelet, which possibly prevents him from being spied on by Hitogami. Orsted also instructs Rudy to contact him again once his magic has replenished. Rudy reflects that he doesn't regret betraying Hitogami, and in fact feels that Orsted is much more trustworthy. So after returning, Rudeus informed all those who helped him against Orsted that he lost the battle, and in fact has now joined him as his subordinate. So after the battle, Eris has started living with Rudy and his family, and Rudeus finally hears from Sylphie that Eris has been single-mindedly training for the sole purpose of fighting Orsted along with him. Rudy discovers that from Eris's perspective, he has betrayed her by marrying other women while she has been training. However, despite this, Roxy informs Rudy that Eris is actually expecting him to propose to her to be his third wife. He then sees Eris teaching swordplay to Norn, and he notes how she has grown as a person, as she is now able to logically explain concepts to a beginner, compared to her past self who would only learn things by instinct. Eris and Rudy then talk, and they apologize to each other for breaking the other's heart. He admits that he does love his current wives Sylphie and Roxy more than Eris, and Eris states that she still loves Rudeus. But Rudeus did not explicitly state that he loves her back. She then challenges him to a duel, and she declares that he must love her as well if she wins, and that if he wins, she will leave him alone. So Eris and Rudy face each other for a duel outside the Sharia city. Ghislaine acts as their judge, but as the fight commences, neither of them moves to attack. Rudy announces that he doesn't want to fight if it means that Eris will leave, and declares that he loves her as well. Eris walks up to him and questions if he will still love her despite her shortcomings compared to Roxy and Sylphie. Rudy reassures her that he loves her no matter what happens. Rudy then gives a marriage proposal to Eris, and she accepts it. Then back at home during dinner, he announces that Eris will be his wife. Roxy and Sylphie accept Eris into their family, but Aisha and Norn aren't happy with Rudy for taking on a third wife, but ultimately they accept Eris as well. Ghislaine announces that now she has left Eris in Rudy's care, and her mission is done. She plans to go back to the Asura Empire to enact revenge on those who killed Saros Greyrat, who was her former master and Eris's grandfather. Rudy warns Ghislaine that Water God and North Emperor are hired by Asura Empire, and Ghislaine acknowledges that she would not be able to defeat them alone. Rudy suggests that Ghislaine consider allying herself with Princess Ariel, and she agrees to speak with Ariel. After dinner, Rudy goes back to his bedroom and finds Eris inside. Eris is very sexually assertive, and they have sex for the second time. Then, as he wakes up the next morning, he receives a letter from Orsted. In Orsted's letter, he asks Rudy to meet him in a hut outside Sharia City's suburb, and he tells him to come alone. Rudy is nervous as he wants to make a good first impression on his new boss. So Rudy meets Orsted in the hut, and it turns out that, unbeknownst to him, Eris has also followed Rudeus there. Eris continues to distrust Orsted, and warns him not to harm Rudeus. Orsted states that he will fulfill his promise to protect Rudeus's family right now. They plan to summon a guardian magical beast that possesses a strong fate to protect Rudeus's family. Orsted reasons that this will provide adequate protection, as Hitogami cannot manipulate the fate of inhuman beings and cannot manipulate a large number of people at once. However, Orsted warns that since they cannot predict or monitor Hitogami's actions, they should also frequently check in on his family. Orsted sees that Rudy has several questions for him and gives him permission to ask whatever he wants to know. So Rudy asks to know about Orsted himself. They first review Orsted's curse, which is that Orsted is feared and distrusted by all living creatures with certain exceptions such as Nanahoshi and Rudy. Rudy reveals that this may be because he is from a different world just like Nanahoshi. Other exceptions to this curse are those from the ancient dragon tribe. Next, Rudy learns that Orsted's ability to be invisible from Hitogami's view is actually not a curse. It is actually a technique developed by the first-generation dragon god for fighting Hitogami, which allows him to see fate and deviate from the path predestined by fate. However, the downside of this technique is that it causes your magic regeneration to be 1,000 times slower. Therefore, Orsted cannot freely use magic and cannot fight to his fullest ability. He reveals that he had actually used up a considerable amount of magic power in his fight against Rudy, and so he cannot fight seriously for a while. Therefore, Orsted is relying on Rudy to act on his behalf. Rudy then asks why Orsted is fighting Hitogami. Orsted reveals that his father, the first-generation dragon god, was killed by Hitogami. Since then, the ancient dragon tribe's greatest wish and the sole reason for the existence of subsequent dragon gods is to defeat Hitogami. Orsted reveals that he is from the 100th generation of dragon god, and that he was sent from the past to the present by his father, using a method of reincarnation. Orsted also reveals that he has been alive for the past 2,000 years. Rudy thinks to himself that Orsted's grudge against Hitogami is too strong to be solely fueled by revenge for his father. He asks Orsted to clarify the reason for his grudge, but Orsted gives a vague answer. Nevertheless, Rudy decides to trust Orsted. Rudy then asks about the Laplace factor, and he reviews what he knows about Laplace. He says that Laplace was responsible for a war 400 years ago. He had a lot of magic power, but was unable to use battle aura. He was ultimately sealed by Perugius and 2 others, but will soon revive in the future. And he was the one who caused the downfall of the Supered tribe. Orsted reveals that Laplace's method of reviving is the same as the method of reincarnation used by the dragon tribe. Laplace was previously a demon dragon king, who was one of the 5 first-generation dragon generals. But once Laplace fought against the first-generation dragon god, and later he realized that Hitogami had manipulated him. So he became the dragon god's subordinate once again, while fighting Hitogami. The first-generation dragon god died, while Laplace survived. He escaped the collapsing dragon world and drifted to this world. He became the second-generation dragon god, and his goal was to defeat Hitogami. Laplace started the human-demon race war and fought the fighting god, who was Hitogami's apostle. As a result of the battle, Laplace has lost his memory, and his soul was split into 2 halves, the demon god and the technique god. Demon god Laplace lost the power of dragons, but retained his magic knowledge and magic power. He also hated the human race, and so rallied the demon race to exterminate humans. The other half, known as the technique god Laplace, lost the power of magic, but retained his knowledge of techniques. He created the 7 great powers rankings, and his goal was to overthrow Hitogami. Orsted also explains that the first-generation dragon god invented the method of reincarnation, where you send one's soul into the future by taking over another being's body and ultimately reviving. However, to reduce the chance of the other being's body rejecting one's soul, the dragon god implanted his factor into multiple people. This factor is passed on to their descendants and modifies their bodies slightly. Orsted explains that many dragon tribe members have used this method of reincarnation, including Perugius. Prior to being sealed by Perugius, demon god Laplace distributed his factor and sent his soul into the future for the purpose of reincarnating himself. And currently, people with Laplace's characteristics and possessing the Laplace factor are beginning to appear. Characteristics such as an aptitude towards magic, having a large amount of magic power, green hair, and having demon eyes at birth are signs of having Laplace factor. Sylphie and Rudy are examples of such people, but Orsted reassures Rudy that he and Sylphie are not Laplace himself. Orsted further reassures Rudy that while Rudy did reincarnate, he likely reincarnated in the body of a baby who was destined to be stillborn, and therefore did not displace someone else's life. Rudy next asks Orsted about the Mana Calamity. However, Orsted is unable to give any further information. Rudy then shares with Orsted the diary from his future self. He then clarifies the terms of his working relationship under Orsted, and Orsted reassures Rudy that he will receive breaks to see his family. Next, Rudy asks about receiving the money to support his family. to which Orsted gives him a valuable dagger and a bag of gems, which can be sold for considerable sums of money. Orsted says he will read the future diary, and they agree to meet again the next day. The next day, Rudy goes back to the hut to meet Orsted. He comes alone this time, but outside the hut, he sees Zenoba lying face down, but he was still alive. Orsted explains that the previous night Zenoba went to collect the broken magic armor and unexpectedly encountered Orsted. Due to Orsted's curse, Zenoba decided to fight him. Fortunately, instead of fighting Zenoba, Orsted used hypnosis magic to put Zenoba to sleep for a few hours. So Orsted and Rudy then resume their main discussions. Orsted has finished reading the future Rudy's diary. But before discussing that further, he asks Rudy to recount all his conversations with Hitogami. So Rudy describes each of his encounters and conversations with Hitogami in detail, including the advice given and its consequences. After hearing this, Orsted suggests that Hitogami seems to have manipulated Rudy to change history, and that given that Rudy has strong fate, history was originally not supposed to change. However, Orsted still doesn't understand why Hitogami changed history to this degree. Orsted thinks that he will try to once again change history to one that is favorable to him. Rudy wonders if they can collect the hidden treasures and reach Hitogami, but Orsted replies that the last treasure is in Laplace's possession, who will revive in about 80 years. Orsted believes that Hitogami has the ability to be trusted by all living beings, and so he has difficulty dealing with irregularities such as Rudy. Orsted states that their first mission is to readjust history, so that Ariel will become Asura Kingdom's queen. In the original timeline, Ariel should have become queen, and was in fact protected by a considerably powerful fate. Originally, there were 3 key people to her rise in power. They were Guardian Magician Derek Redbat, Eris Greyrat, and Tristina Purplehorse. Derek was a shrewd man, and ambitious, and was originally Ariel's Guardian Magician. He would have also persuaded Perugius to assist Ariel. He would have remained as Ariel's advisor, and eventually become Prime Minister. Eris would have married to Luke, and together they would have protected Ariel from assassins. Tristina was a child from Asura's upper aristocrat Purplehorse family, but she was abducted when she was 8 years old, and became a sex slave to Senior Minister Darius Ganius. Ariel helped Tristina before she could be disposed of in secret. As a result, Darius Ganius would have lost his position, and the first Prince Gravel would have lost his influence. So Orsted and Rudy then plan to find Tristina to force the Senior Minister's downfall. If they fail, they plan for Rudy to kill Darius. Orsted reveals that in January, the information that the king has fallen ill will arrive, but until then, they will continue their preparations. They consider using the magic armor that is currently broken, but they need time to miniaturize it, so they shelve that idea for now. Instead, Orsted promises to give Rudy a robe, since he cannot wear battle aura. They discuss Fighting God's armor, which was built by Demon Dragon King Laplace. While it gives you great power, it also controls your mind, similar to the Superd tribe's spears. Orsted also gives Rudy a magic circle that can summon a guardian magical beast to protect his family. Rudy plans on summoning the beast tomorrow. Rudy worries that one of his descendants will become Laplace, but Orsted reassures him that this will not be the case. Rudy asks Orsted to forgive Nanahoshi for luring him during their fight, and he places the blame on himself, so Orsted agrees to forgive her. Orsted also gives him a ring that works like a compass, allowing Rudy to contact Orsted in emergencies. Rudy then leaves the hut and carries Zenoba back to Ginger's room. Later, Rudy reflected on the fact that Orsted implied that there would always be a next time if they failed. He considers the possibility that Orsted may have time travel abilities similar to his future self. Rudy pushes these thoughts out of his mind, and vows to try his best without relying on do-overs. Rudy works on improving his combat power by sparring with Eris. He asks Cliff and Zenoba to repair and improve the magic armor by making it smaller and more efficient. Rudy then gathers his family to their garden as he plans to summon the guardian magical beast. Various family members distrust Orsted and are skeptical that Orsted's summoning magic circle is safe. But Rudy reaffirms his trust in Orsted. Rudy activates the magic circle and ends up summoning Arumanfi, who is a servant of Perugius. Arumanfi is very annoyed at being separated from his connection with Perugius and demands that Rudy cancel their new contract. So they quickly cancel Arumanfi's new contract with Rudy with help from Perugius. After this, Rudy tries the summoning again, and this time he pictures summoning a lion, but he ends up summoning a large dog. Eris soon points out that the dog looks similar to the holy beast that they met in Dorudia village. Rudy worries about angering the Dorudia tribe for taking away the holy beast, but he finally decides to make a contract with the holy beast. They then name him Leo, Later, Luke comes to Rudy's house and directly asks for his support in Ariel's bid for the throne of the Asura kingdom. Ariel has given up on persuading Perugius to support her. Rudy suspects that Luke has been influenced by Hitogami, just like in his future self's timeline. But Luke denies knowing Hitogami. He says he is making this request on his own accord. Rudy tells Luke that he will consider his request to support Ariel and get back to him later. Rudy thinks to himself that he isn't sure if supporting Ariel would be acting in accordance with Hitogami's plans, so he wants to consult with Orsted first. Soon Rudy meets with Orsted. They update each other on what has happened in the last 10 days. Rudy tells Orsted that the holy beast Leo was summoned as his guardian magical beast. Orsted is surprised that such a powerful beast was summoned. They feel that the safety of Rudy's family is now nearly guaranteed. Rudy informs Orsted that he has asked Cliff to help solve Orsted's curse by developing a magic tool. On the other hand, Orsted has asked Perugius to help Ariel become queen. But Perugius refused, as he isn't certain that Ariel is worthy of becoming queen. Rudy informs Orsted about Luke's visit with him, about the fact that Luke may be Hitogami's apostle, and that Luke asked for Rudy's support for Ariel. After hearing everything, Orsted insists they should still help Ariel. However, Orsted suggests killing Luke as he is quite certain that Luke is Hitogami's apostle. However, Rudy is reluctant to kill someone, and especially an acquaintance like Luke. Rudy responds that he is concerned that if they kill Luke, they will take away a major source of emotional support for Ariel, and that he may be vital for her to become queen. And furthermore, Hitogami may have taken into account that Orsted would try to kill Luke. Orsted agrees to hold off on the idea of killing Luke. Rudy asks Orsted how many people Hitogami can manipulate. Orsted replies that Hitogami can use the future sight on up to 3 people. Although he could manipulate more people without using future sight, he typically limits himself to manipulating 3 people. Next, Orsted gives Rudy a robe as previously promised, to improve his defense in combat. It has considerable magic resistance, and is highly blade resistant. It also reduces the weight of the wearer by half, and allows one to move very quickly. Back at home, Rudy has a discussion with Sylphie. He confirms that he will be supporting Ariel in becoming the queen as per Orsted's orders. Sylphie remains distrustful of Orsted, and asks what Orsted has to gain by doing this. Rudy replies that Orsted wants political connections. Orsted's plan is to ask Perugius to support Ariel, as Perugius already has political influence. They discuss the fact that Rudy will be going to Asura Kingdom to support Ariel. Sylphie states that she wants to come as well to support her friend. But Rudy warns Sylphie to be aware that Hitogami can manipulate anyone, and he also reveals that Luke is likely being manipulated. After hearing this, Sylphie declares that if Luke ever were to betray Ariel, she would kill Luke. Rudy thinks to himself that if they were forced to kill Luke, he would take it upon himself to do it. Rudy, along with Sylphie, goes to Sky Castle and sees Ariel having tea with Nanahoshi. Ariel looks tired and depressed, and they join Sylphie for tea. Nanahoshi tells Rudy that Orsted has forgiven her for her betrayal. Ariel notes that while she was afraid of Orsted, she didn't hate him. After hearing this, Rudy wonders if Orsted's curse is less effective on her, and if Hitogami may be manipulating her. Ariel muses that she had planned to ask for Rudy's support in the past, but decided against it, because she felt Rudeus was too powerful, and she wasn't worthy to control that power. Rudy counters that while he has great magic power, he considers himself an average person, with all the worries of an average person. He tells Ariel that he intends to support her, and Ariel is very grateful for it. She inquires if supporting her was Orsted's idea, but Rudy lies so that he can feed Hitogami false information by Luke. He tells her that it was actually his idea to support her. But he also has Orsted's blessing. Ariel's group discusses that their first goal is to gain Perugius on their side, because he has a wide influence. Rudy brings up the question that Perugius asked, which says, "What is the most important factor to a king?" Perugius promised that if Ariel came up with the correct answer, he would offer her his support. Rudy thinks to himself that Ariel's former guardian magician, Derek Redhat, would have been the one to tell her the correct answer to the question. So, he asks Ariel about Derek. Ariel suddenly remembers that Derek's death was what inspired her to become king. She recounts how Derek sacrificed himself to save her life, and prior to that, she had no interest in being king. She recounts Derek's final words, which implored her to become the king. Inspired by the sincerity of his dying words, she decided to strive for the throne. Despite Ariel remembering her reason for wanting to be king, she is still unable to answer the question of what is a king's most important factor. So Orsted proposes to go to the Book Labyrinth, a place where a copy of every book of the world is made by a demon king. So this place is located in the demon continent, and they need to teleport there. Orsted gives Rudy a sketch of a specific book if he doesn't find the necessary information. The next day in the base of operation of Orsted, they find a magic circle in the basement. Those who are going are Rudy, Sylphiette, Luke, Ariel, Eris, and Ghislaine. So they use the magic circle, and then they appear in a room similar to the others' teleport rooms. Eris excitedly wants to explore, but she is stopped by Rudy. When they enter, they find hallways of books, arranged from oldest to newest, and in the center of the labyrinth, they find the Demon King Batobi, a huge slime with an eyeball that uses his tentacles to write the books. They avoid him, and decide to search for a book about the first king of Asura. Soon, they find a book, and in it, they read that he was the third prince during the Laplace War. After his older brother and parent were killed, he became the next king of Asura. They also find that he have many achievements, but in the same time he wasn't perfect, and commonly he went to taverns, got drunk and fought. Rudy also finds magical books, and one of them is called The Powerless God. It has a way that can change the rules of the world and can nullify the power of gods and abilities. Rudy thinks about how to remove curses and how it may help Zenith and Orsted, so he takes notes from it to his diary. But then soon, Rudy realizes that one of the tentacles of the Demon King started a copy of his diary. So Rudy writes in his diary that he wants to have a conversation with the Demon King. And so the Demon King appears, because the future diary of Rudy was an interesting experience of an alternative future. The Demon King grant to Rudy a wish. Rudy shows him the sketch that Orsted drew, and the Demon Kings give him a book. And that book is the diary of Derek Redbat. So after reading his diary, Ariel finds the answer of being a king, and passes the diary to Luke. Later when they were leaving, the Demon King became angry, because a tear of Luke damaged the diary, and he started to attack. So the group starts to run away, and they quickly leave the labyrinth. Soon, Ariel arranges an audience with Perugius to once again ask for his support. Perugius his question once again, what is the most important factor of a king? Ariel's answer is, to inherit wills, that is to be influenced by others. Perugius laughs at this answer and calls her a fool. Ariel stands her ground and admits she may be a fool. She declares that she intends to state her true feelings. She further states that if their ideals aren't compatible, then despite the fact that she wants his assistance, they may not be able to work well together. Perugius is impressed with Ariel's conviction and agrees to lend his support. So Ariel thanks Perugius and then leaves. But Rudy stays behind and asks Perugius if Ariel gave the correct answer. He confirms that Ariel's answer was wrong. However, the way Ariel carries herself reminds Perugius of his old friend Caunus from many years ago, who was called the Ideal King. Rudy asks Perugius, what is the Ideal King? But Perugius refuses to answer the question. Perugius asks why Rudy didn't bring up Orsted in Ariel's negotiations with him. Rudy thinks to himself that it's because he knows that Orsted had already asked Perugius himself to support Ariel, and he was also refused. But Rudeus gives a non-committal answer to Perugius, so Perugius calls him out on this and leaves. So Ariel, Luke, Sylphie, and Rudy plan their next steps. Ariel announces that she has heard the news of her father's illness. Rudy is surprised, as according to Orsted they had expected the news to come later. Rudy wonders if Ariel may be influenced by Hitagami. They then debate on the best way to travel to the Asura kingdom. Rudy suggests teleporting to a magic circle just outside the kingdom. The reason he offers up is to better hide the fact that they use teleportation magic. In his mind, the reason for this is to give him an excuse to track down Tristina, who will be key to taking down Darius, which will weaken the First Prince's faction. Sylphie, Luke, and Ariel all feel that they should instead directly teleport to Asura Kingdom to avoid the dangers associated with travel and avoid assassins and mercenaries. But one familiar of Perugius announces that all the magic teleportation circles inside Asura Kingdom have been destroyed, and so it is impossible to teleport directly into Asura Kingdom, and Rudy wonders who could have done this. Therefore, they are forced into Rudy's initial proposal, which is to teleport to a magic circle just outside the Asura Kingdom border. The magical beast Leo integrates himself into Rudy's family and acts as their guard dog. Meanwhile, Ghislaine confirms that Leo is from the Darudia tribe. Then Rudy, Cliff, and Zenoba meet to have dinner at a fancy restaurant. Cliff and Zenoba are concerned that Rudy is now working under Orsted. They feel that Orsted is too dangerous and cannot be trusted. Rudy tries to tell them the truth at first, that Orsted has a curse that causes others to fear and hate him. However, Cliff and Zenoba remain unconvinced. Rudy therefore lies and tells them that he actually plans to kill Orsted in the future, and so needs their help to upgrade the magic armor. Rudy also asks Cliff for help in reducing the power of Orsted's curse. Rudy lies by saying that the curse is like a barrier that weakens his opponents. And so Cliff and Zenoba agree to help Rudy. So while Rudy was drinking with his friends, Roxy, Sylphie, and Eris held a meeting. This is the 26th regular meeting between Roxy and Sylphie, but the first one for Eris. Roxy explains to Eris that the purpose of these meetings is to help their communication and dispel any feelings of envy. They all discuss how they came to meet Rudy and the history of their relationship with him. Lilia also joins them and reminisces on her past history with Rudy as well, and they all start drinking alcohol. Despite being pregnant, Elise joins them and starts drinking as well. Only Roxy doesn't drink as she is also pregnant, and later she casts detoxification magic on everyone once they all finish drinking. Then later Rudy meets Orsted. He reports that Ariel successfully persuaded Perugius, and he also told him the news that the magic circles to Asura Kingdom are broken. Orsted believes that the destruction of the magic teleportation circles was caused by Hitogami. Orsted further deduces that Hitogami's disciple must therefore be First Prince Grabble, or Senior Minister Darius. This is because only people with great political influence can access and destroy the magic circles, as they are all well guarded by soldiers. Orsted reiterates that Luke is likely an apostle of Hitogami. He speculates that the third and last apostle is someone talented with the sword or magic. Based on this, he believes that the North Emperor Auber and water god Rita are likely candidates. Orsted tells Rudy that all the potential apostles of Hitogami, such as Darius, Auber, Rita, can be killed, while Luke should continue to be observed and killed if necessary. Then later, at home, Rudy and Sylphie announce to the family that they will be leaving for Asura Kingdom and will be gone for 3-4 months. Eris decided for herself that she would go as well. Norn and Aisha tease Rudy that he is likely to come back with another wife. Rudy wants to protest that this won't be the case, but he knows he no longer has any credibility on this matter. Rudy notes that since both he and Sylphie are leaving, they are leaving their daughter Lucy without any parents at home, so they leave Lucy for Lilia to raise. Since Roxy is staying behind at home, Rudy tries to spend more time with her before he leaves. They agree to name their future baby Rollo or Lara if the baby is a boy or girl respectively. So Ariel's group, including Sylphie, Luke, Elmore, Clean, Rudeus, Eris and Ghislaine, leave Sharia and is headed towards the Asura Kingdom to help make Ariel the king. They take a magic teleportation circle to Sky Castle of Perugius. After greeting Perugius, they take a magic circle that transports them to a ruin near the Red Dragon's upper jaw. As they are teleported, it is almost nighttime, so the group decides to rest near the road. Then, on Rudy's turn for night patrol, he goes into the forest and meets Orsted, who is following the group. Rudy reports on the events of the past few days, and Orsted advises that the forest of the Red Dragon's upper jaw is the most likely place for Darius to send soldiers to kill Ariel, as it is still within Asura Kingdom's jurisdiction, while being distant enough to avoid creating big news. They speculate that the North Emperor Auber Corvette is likely to appear there as well. Then they discuss the matter of Luke being an apostle. Orsted reveals that Hitogami can only reassign his apostles at certain turning points in the future. In this case, the turning point is when Ariel does or does not become queen. Until then, apostles cannot be swapped or changed, and any apostles that die cannot be replaced. Rudy is annoyed at not having received this crucial information earlier, but they finish their conversation, and Rudeus returns to camp. Next day, the group arrives at the forest of the Red Dragon's upper jaw, and according to Orsted, it is the most likely place to be ambushed. The group stops for a moment at the location where Ariel's group was ambushed when she was first fleeing Asura Kingdom to Renoa, and she pays her respects for the people that she lost that day. Then on the next day, the group is ambushed by a group of soldiers. Ghislaine, Eris, and Sylphie fight the group of soldiers. Meanwhile, Luke protects the carriage and Rudy fights in the rear. Using his eyes of foresight to monitor the situation, he is looking for and anticipating a surprise attack from Auber. But soon, the North King Wee Ta appears and challenges Ghislaine to a duel. He uses his polished armor to reflect the sun's light to periodically blind Ghislaine, and so Ghislaine struggles to fight Wee Ta. Rudy sees this and summons Mud Rain, therefore nullifying Wee Ta's strategy and allowing Ghislaine to take the opportunity and deal a serious injury to him. After helping Ghislaine, Rudy looks to the rear and unexpectedly finds that Auber has appeared from a hole in the road. Auber tries to kill Rudy, but Rudy repelled his attack. Auber and Rudy briefly fight, and when Ghislaine, Eris, Sylphie arrive to support Rudy, Auber and his group decide to retreat. Then Luke stares in disbelief as he sees that the soldiers they just fought have the Milbot's crest, meaning that his father Pyleman Nodos Greyrat has betrayed Ariel, and his father is now their enemy. So Luke is in disbelief at the fact that his father betrayed Ariel. Ariel, in contrast, had fully expected this. So because Auber and his group may continue to ambush them, Rudy proposes that they try to smuggle themselves into the country. By doing this, Rudy thinks to himself that he would also be able to complete one of his objectives, which is to find Tristina. Luke voices out loud that he feels Rudy's recent actions were strange, and that he doesn't trust him. Luke suggests to Ariel to retreat temporarily, and to ask for further reinforcements from Perugius. However, Ariel decides to follow Rudy's plan, so they change their course to find smuggling bandits. Later, during Rudy's turn for night patrol, he meets Orsted again. They talk about recent events. They are now more certain than ever that Luke is an apostle, but they agree to leave him alone for now. After returning to camp, Rudy finds that Ariel is up and awake. She asks him to accompany her on a walk in the woods. After entering the forest, Rudy and Ariel sit on a trunk and start with some trivial small talk. Suddenly, Ariel brings up Luke and the fact that she believes that he is betraying them. Rudy says that he is probably being manipulated, but he hesitates to reveal that Hitogami is behind this. Ariel requests to meet Orsted to understand why he is helping her, but before Rudy can give an answer, Orsted appears behind them. Even after being affected by Orsted's curse, Ariel regains her composure, and they start to talk. Orsted explains that a being called Hitogami is his enemy, and is currently siding with Darius and Grabble, who is the first prince. Orsted reveals that 100 years into the future, if Grabble becomes king, it leads to events where the kingdom of Asura will fall. But if Ariel becomes king, the kingdom will survive. Orsted reveals that Hitogami wants Asura kingdom to perish because the person who will defeat him is born in Asura kingdom. Ariel also learns that there are only 3 Hitogami apostles at one time, and that Luke, Darius, and either the North Emperor Auber or Water God Rita are the current candidates. So after hearing and understanding everything, Ariel decides to become Orsted's subordinate. On the next day, the group enters the territory of the Band of Thieves, where they are surrounded by bandits, and their leader appears. Using code phrases learned from Orsted, Rudy indicates that he wants their group to be smuggled and to meet Tristina. They arrive at a hut, and the group rests while they wait for Tristina. Some hours later, Tristina arrives. Rudy engages with her, but she comes across as guarded and suspicious. Thinking to himself, Rudy tries to come up with a plan to gain her trust over time, and slowly reveal their group's goal to overthrow Darius. Ariel sees Tristina, and instead goes for the straightforward approach. She identifies Tristina as Tristina Purplehorse, a noble daughter that she met several years ago. Tristina also recognizes Ariel, and immediately lets her guard down. Ariel asks about the fact that Tristina had gone missing and how she came to be a bandit. Tristina reviews her life story, starting with how she was kidnapped and became a sex slave for Darius. She was then sold to bandits to become their boss's concubine, then trained as a thief, and then became a free woman when the boss changed. After hearing her story, Ariel promises to exact revenge on Darius on Tristina's behalf. Ariel asks Tristina to testify against Darius about being his sex slave. Tristina accepts the offer and joins their group. Rudy looks at this exchange in admiration at how Ariel was able to skillfully and easily get Tristina on their side. The next day, they are led by Tristina, and they arrive at a lake and a cliff with a secret cave. After several hours of walking through its labyrinthine tunnels, they leave the cave and arrive in Asura Kingdom territory. As the group passes by the Fitoa region, Rudy, Sylphie, and Eris reminisce about the past. The group then arrives at a town named Ricket, which connects to the Asura capital. They stop at an inn associated with the Thief Guild to rest, and Tristina goes out to gather information. Tristina returns and goes to deliver her news to Ariel, while Rudy and Ghislaine are on guard duty. Rudy then hears some arguing in Ariel's room and goes to investigate. He enters the room to find Ariel and Luke arguing. Rudy learns that Triss has confirmed that Philemon was one of the culprits in the execution of Sauros, and that Ariel will keep her promise with Ghislaine to kill him. Luke is angry as he still believes that Rudy is aiming to take over the Nodos Grey Rat house. Ariel states that after taking power, she has no intention of granting nobility to Rudy, which Rudy is grateful for since he had no intention of accepting such a position. The next day, Luke admits that he did indeed receive advice from Hitogami. The advice was a warning of Rudy's betrayal, that Rudy's goal is to be Lord of Nodos Grey Rat house, and that he will defect to Darius's side, and that all of his actions and the events that occurred to the group are the results of his scheming. Days later, with Luke still hostile against Rudy, they arrive at the capital city Ars. The group goes to Ariel's second house within Asura, which will be their base. As they travel through the Commoner district, they see that Ariel is still popular with the common people. When they enter the nobles' district, a soldier runs up to them. They reveal themselves to be Isolte, one of Eris's acquaintances from the Holy Land of the Sword, and they chat for a bit. The group then arrives at Ariel's second house. Ariel says that she needs 10 days to gather her allies and prepare her venue to take down Darius and the First Prince's faction. They decide to use Sylphie disguised as Ariel as bait to draw in the enemy, giving them an opportunity to launch their attacks to reduce the enemy's forces. So Ariel works on her preparations to gather her allies. Meanwhile, their group is frequently attacked by assassins targeting Sylphie, who is impersonating Ariel, while the real Ariel hides as a maid. Then at one party, Luke meets his father Philemon. They discuss why he betrayed Ariel, and Luke pleads for him to return to Ariel's faction, but Philemon refuses. Then on day 9, preparations for the venue have been completed. Their plan is for Ariel to host a party, with all the major nobles of Asura in attendance, where she will announce that Perugius is supporting her, and reveal Darius's crimes to the other nobles to guarantee her ascension to the throne. That evening, as the group returns to their base, an assailant blocks the road and announces himself as the North King Twin Swords, a pair of swordsmen who are twins, so Eris decides to fight them. Meanwhile, Wee Ta appears with black armor and confronts Ghislaine for a rematch. So while they fight, Rudy searches for Auber, who he suspects is waiting for a surprise attack. Using his spirits of light, Rudy notices a strange cloth on the side of one of the stone walls, and without hesitation fires a stone cannon. It was Auber, and he was able to evade the attack, but his leg was pierced, which severely limited his mobility. Eris defeats the twin swordsman Knuckleguard, though she suffers a major injury to her arm, and Ghislaine overwhelms Wee Ta thanks to her great night vision. Wee Ta then throws a smokescreen and tries to attack the carriage while hoping to find Ariel. However, Sylphie was inside instead, and she counters with a flame tornado, which clears the smokescreen and illuminates their surrounding. They see Auber escape using his pair of claws to climb up the wall, and soon he disappears. They see Wee Ta trying to escape in an alley, but they decide to pursue and finish off Wee Ta. Rudy chases Wee Ta into an alleyway, but he finds him already dead with a hole in his chest. Rudy quickly realizes that the wound was made by Orsted. The others assume the wound was caused by a stone cannon from Rudy, as no one but himself is aware that Orsted is helping them. And even though Auber escaped, their group's plan to reduce the enemy's strength was a success, as 2 North Kings were killed. So several important nobles, including the leaders of the Boreas and Nodos house, Senior Minister Darius arrive at Ariel's party. When the party begins, Ariel introduces Tristina to everyone in attendance as the long-lost Tristina Purplehorse. Tristina recounts her life story to all the nobles, from how she was betrayed by her family and sold to become Darius's sex slave, to how she became associated with a band of thieves and regained her freedom, leaving out the fact that she also became a thief herself to avoid tarnishing her reputation. Darius accuses Tristina of being fake and brings in the head of the Purple Horse house, who is Tristina's father. However, Ariel had anticipated this and had already contacted the Purple Horse family, and the head of the Purple Horse house confirms that Tristina is indeed real and claims that she was stolen away by Darius. With this, Darius's reputation is badly damaged. So the first Prince Grabble then arrives at the party. He states that Darius should not be punished despite his crimes, as he is an important player in running Asura Kingdom. He calls for a vote among all the nobles in attendance, asking them to confirm their allegiance to him and Darius, or Ariel. Before the vote commences, Ariel announces she has one more person to introduce. The nobles see the sky castle floating in the night sky, and Perugius makes his entrance, along with his 12 familiars. Upon his entrance, it is clear that he is very well respected among the nobles of Asura, as he commands more respect than even Ariel or Grabble. Grabble offers Perugius the highest-ranking seat among the 3 seats of honor. Perugius politely declines and offers it to Ariel instead, making clear to everyone that it is Ariel whom he supports. So just as Rudy was thinking that everything was going well for them, something falls from the ceiling to interrupt the party, and it is revealed to be water god Rita Rhea, who has come to support Darius. So water god Rita has a sword technique that allows her to kill all opponents within a certain radius around her when they move even the smallest of muscles. With this, she easily kills 2 of Perugius's familiars. Rudy understands that the situation is out of hand, and he can't do anything, so he sent mana to the ring on his finger which contacts Orsted. No one else dares to move anymore for fear of being instantly killed, including Rudy, Ghislaine, and Eris. So Rita then commands Auber to kill Ariel and finish the job they were hired for. Suddenly, apprentice knights appear, including Isolde. Isolde demands her master to tell her what is going on. Rita states that she intends to murder Ariel, and then intends to let herself die at the hands of Isolde, who will become a hero and carry on the water god style. As this happens, Rudy tries to come up with a plan to save Ariel from Auber without being attacked by Rita. He considers using electric magic to attack Rita and Auber simultaneously. But then suddenly, the air changes and everyone senses Orsted's presence approaching. At Rita's instructions, Auber grabs Darius and runs away. Rita begins to explain her motivations, and she reveals that as a child, Darius saved her from having her hands cut off by a mob, and therefore she feels she owes him her life. She had forgotten about this for many years until recently, when she had a revelation in a dream, which told her to come back to the royal palace, where she could return the favor to Darius. With this, it's confirmed that she is an apostle of Hitogami. So Orsted then arrives and promptly kills her with a single strike. With Rita dead, Rudy, Ghislaine, and Eris are now free to move. They chase after and quickly catch up to Darius and Auber. Darius mutters in frustration at this turn of events. He reveals that he was told by Hitogami to destroy the magic teleportation portals and recall Auber to the capital to protect himself from Rudy. Darius tries to negotiate with Eris and Ghislaine by claiming that he has been helping the Boreas house rebuild the Fitoa territory. However, he also reveals that he directly led to the death of Sauros. Eris and Ghislaine therefore resolve themselves to kill him. Seeing that negotiations have failed, Auber launches an attack. Auber is able to badly damage Rudy's leg. He almost cut it clean off, and he stabs Eris in the abdomen with a poisoned kunai, but he also receives an arm injury from Ghislaine. Rudy then launches an exploding stone cannon at Darius. Although Auber blocks the rock bullet, its fragments blind Darius and distracts Auber. With that opening, Eris damages Auber's other arm and Ghislaine lands a killing blow. The battle is over, and Ghislaine then kills Darius. Rudy heals all their injuries, and they cure Eris's poisoning with the antidote Orsted told Rudy Auber kept on him to treat that poison he carries as well. So they head back to the party venue and are greeted with an unexpected sight. They see Luke holding a dagger against Ariel's neck. So a few minutes prior, after Orsted had killed Rita and left, Luke convinced himself that Orsted is evil. Philemon then bows to Ariel and claims he only pretended to betray her. Ariel is angry at this bold-faced lie as she knows Philemon sent assassins to kill her. She tells him to have some pride and at least admit his betrayal. Ariel sentences Philemon to be executed right there and asks for Luke's sword. Luke experiences mixed feelings about his father. On one hand, Philemon had protected Ariel all those years until his betrayal, and although he was never close with his father, he didn't hold any bad feelings toward him either. Without thinking clearly, Luke holds his sword to Ariel's neck. Luke also continues to be extremely suspicious of Orsted. He voices his concern at Rudy being Orsted's subordinate and asks Sylphie if she trusts Orsted. Sylphie confirms she doesn't trust Orsted, but she trusts Rudy. Then Rudy enters the venue and while still holding his sword to Ariel's throat, he asks Sylphie who she would choose to save, Ariel or Rudy. Sylphie chooses Rudy without hesitation, and Luke then regains his senses and releases Ariel. He continues to distrust Orsted, but he decides to support Ariel regardless. He braces himself for execution for his betrayal, but Ariel forgives him. Ariel decides not to execute Philemon, as he was just a pawn in Darius's game. And with Eris's encouragement, Ghislaine reluctantly agrees with this decision. Meanwhile, Perugius watched this entire exchange in amusement. Grable remained seated in his chair, and he was shocked and exhausted, as his strongest backer was now dead. Later, Philemon is stripped of his position and placed under house arrest, while Luke becomes the Nodos Greyrat family's head. So on day one after Ariel's party, Rudy has a meeting with Orsted. Rudy is worried that Ariel's ascension to king is still not guaranteed as he is concerned about other traps set by Hitogami, but Orsted is not worried. Orsted reveals that he wasn't being truthful to Rudy when he said he could see the future, because up until this point, he never fully trusted Rudy, and was monitoring him during these events to see if he would betray Orsted. He explains that whenever time progresses for 200 years, he has the ability to reset himself to the year 330, with his memories intact. Basically, it's a time loop in which Orsted is stuck, but Hitogami in contrast doesn't retain his memories with each loop, and so he isn't aware of Orsted's reset ability. Orsted reveals that he has reset well over 100 times. Therefore, Orsted reassures Rudy that based on all the previous timelines that he has seen, Ariel is guaranteed to become king at this point. On day 3, Isolde visits Eris and Rudy in their home, which was gifted to them by Ariel. Isolde makes clear that she holds no grudge against Ariel or her faction for her master's death. Isolde also makes it clear that she came to visit only to see Eris. Eris and Isolde then spend some time together exploring the Imperial City, with Rudeus joining them as well, to make sure Isolde didn't try to attack Eris. On day 5, Rudy and Sylphie have dinner at the Boreas house. Eris was not invited as the Boreas are still wary of her, and are not interested in welcoming her back. On day 8, Tristina returns to the aristocracy. Ariel plans to use Tristina to broker deals with her group of thieves. Perugius returns to Sky Castle, where he can revive his 2 familiars who were killed. On day 9, Sylphie and Rudy meet Ariel. Ariel thanks Rudy for all his help, and admits that without his advice and help, she never would have gotten this far. Ariel asks if Rudy wants anything in return. Rudy asks for a license to sell his Supard race figurines and books, as well as workshops to help with mass producing. Ariel agrees to this request, and she likewise thanks Sylphie for guarding her for the past several years. So, with their work done, Rudy prepares to leave Asura Kingdom. So Ghislaine holds a sword training session with Rudy and Eris, just like the old days. They finish their training session with Ghislaine and Eris sparring. Ghislaine then says her goodbyes to Eris. Once Ghislaine leaves, Eris cries. Then before their departure, several nobles from Ariel's faction, who knew Sylphie, came to see her off. Luke says goodbye to Sylphie and Rudy as well. They forgive each other for distrusting the other, and they say goodbye on good terms. For the return trip, they will go to Sky Castle with Perugius, and then teleport to the ruins near the outskirts of Sharia City. Therefore, the return trip to Sharia will be much faster than the initial trip there. By the time they enter Perugius's castle, the sun had set, and so they spend the night there. Rudy speaks with Sylphie, and Sylphie expresses that she would like to spend more time raising their daughter Lucy, now that she no longer has the role of Ariel's guard. Sylphie states that she initially wanted to be like Eris, who is comparable to Rudy in terms of combat ability. However, she realizes this would be impossible for her at this point, and so she sets her new goal of focusing on raising her family. Rudy, Eris, and Sylphie return to Magic City Sharia after being gone for 2 months. Rudy is relieved to see that nothing has changed since he left and his family is still safe. Aisha and Lilia welcome them home. Roxy's pregnancy continues to progress well, but she is ashamed of how her body has changed. She reveals to Rudy that she is particularly sensitive about the fact that her bell button is now protruding outwards, as she recounts how Rudy previously told her how her belly and navel were perfect. Rudy reassures her that she still likes her new navel, so Rudy hugs her growing belly, and Roxy welcomes him home. The next day, Rudy greets all his friends, Zenoba, Cliff, and Elinalise. He greeted Nanahoshi as well while back at Sky Fortress. He then visits his father's grave. There, Rudy speaks out loud all the events of the past 2 months. Rudy then reflects on the fact that he was very lucky this time to return with no casualties on his side. This journey had several lucky occurrences, such as Orsted appearing to kill the water god, and Auber carrying his venom's antidote on him, which saved Eris's life. He resolves himself to continue to get stronger, so that he can continue to protect his family, without being reliant on his luck. It has been 1.5 years, and Rudy trains with Orsted and improves his magic. He gets Saint class in fire, wind, healing and detoxification magic, as well as intermediate class god barrier magic. Rudeus performs various jobs assigned by Orsted to help various people, and those they helped now will become useful to Orsted in the future. Rudy has also renovated the hut that they use as their base and main office. The building has a conference room, sleeping room, and research room. It also has an armory, which also contains the magic armor, which has been successfully miniaturized. The basement has magic teleport circles which allow them to quickly travel to other major places around the world. Rudy's eldest daughter, Lucy, is now 3 years old. As Rudy is often away carrying out missions for Orsted, she often doesn't recognize him. Rudy has also brought Lucy to meet Orsted, and they get along very well, confirming that Orsted's curse doesn't affect Rudy's descendants. Roxy also gave birth. Although the delivery was complicated by shoulder dystocia, Roxy was able to give birth to a healthy girl whom they named Lara. Lara has blue hair like Roxy, and some family members worry that she may be bullied because of this. Elinalise also gave birth, but without complications, to a healthy baby boy that they named Clive. Eris also wanted to have children, but was initially having difficulty conceiving. However, after taking a break from her training, she was able to conceive. The main cause of her infertility was likely due to her intense daily training. So Asura Kingdom's king, Ariel's father, has passed away from his illness, and Ariel will become queen soon. After Eris got pregnant, a letter was sent to Ghislaine informing her of this news. And after Eris's child is born, they plan to visit the Asura Kingdom to visit Ghislaine. Zenith still hasn't recovered her memory, and her emotions have stopped improving, and she still doesn't speak, and even Orsted does not have any clues regarding a cure for Zenith. Nevertheless, Rudy does not plan on giving up on restoring her memory. Sometime later, Rudy returns home from his mission. Aisha and Sylphie welcome him home. His toddler-aged daughter continues to be wary of Rudy, much to his disappointment. He finds out that Eris has recently saved Linnea de Doldia from slave traders. Linnea recounts her story of how she tried to become a merchant after graduating from school. She soon fell into debt after getting scammed and was sold into slavery. The slave traders then arrive at Rudy's home. They recognize that Rudy is a powerful person both in combat ability and in connections, and so they try to convince him to return Linnea to them. They explain that the Boreas house has already bought Linnea for 300 Asura gold coins. Rudy considers giving up Linnea to the slave traders, but decides against it. He purchases Linnea from the slave traders with 3 bags of magic stones, which are worth 1,500 Asura gold coins in total. Rudy confirms that the slavers don't also have Persena in their possessions. Rudy intimidates the slavers and gets the slaver to promise to also give him Persena if she ever becomes their slave. Trembling in fear, the slaver agrees and leaves. In return for saving her from slavery, it is decided that Linnea will work as a maid in their house. Linnea also recognizes the sacred beast Leo and is able to communicate with him. Later, Rudy meets with Cliff, and together they go to meet Orsted in the city outskirts. They are there to test Cliff's latest iteration of his curse suppression tool. Cliff has made some progress over the past year in suppressing Orsted's curse. Eris and Sylphie's attitude has softened toward Orsted from enemy of all living beings to evil boss, and it's all thanks to Cliff's suppression artifacts. Through his research, Cliff has also come to realize that Rudy lied about the fact that breaking the curse was related to Rudy trying to kill Orsted, and that Rudy was actually initially telling the truth about the fact that Orsted's curse caused living beings to fear and hate him. So with their testing done, Rudy and Cliff return to the university. Rudeus then goes to visit Zenoba. He sees Zenoba and Julie panicking over the fact that blood is flowing from her vagina. Rudeus reassures them that there is no wound to heal, and this was likely menstruation, and so he asks Ginger for help. So Cliff, Zenoba, and Rudy have lunch together, and they discuss the progress on the magic armor. Over the past 1.5 years, there have been several iterations to the magic armor. It has been miniaturized and requires much less magic to power it. It currently performs at the level of a Saint-class swordsman. They have also changed their Gatling gun to a shotgun, because firing off several bullets at once is helpful as a counter against Water God-style swordsmen. On the other hand, Zenoba only made little progress on his autonomous doll research, as he has devoted his time to the magic armor instead. However, Zenoba doesn't mind this. They then discuss mass-producing their super doll and picture book. The limiting factor currently is that they don't have a shop where they can sell their product. Rudy thinks about Linnea, but then Rudy immediately overlooks having Linnea run their shop. They consider hiring another slave to run their business. Rudy then goes home and is accompanied by Roxy and Norn. Roxy and Norn are getting along well. When they arrive home, Lucy greets Norn, but continues to hide herself from Rudy. Norn also finds out that Linnea is now their new maid. Norn and Sylphie wonder if Linnea will join Rudy's collection of wives. Aisha greets everyone and introduces Linnea, who has donned a maid outfit similar to Aisha's. A few days later, Orsted arrives and gives Rudy his next mission, and he needs to depart in 3 days. Rudy goes home and sees Linnea looking dejected by the front entrance. He enters his home and is greeted by Lucy, and it was a pleasant surprise for Rudy. He finds out that Eris has gone to the school to teach swordsmanship to Norn. Rudy goes to the backyard to find Aisha. Aisha is upset about the fact that Linnea broke her favorite teacup. More than that, Aisha is upset at how Linnea is doing a poor job as a maid, such as breaking dishes and getting her fur in the laundry, and the fact that she doesn't learn from her mistakes. Aisha is also upset at Linnea's constant lighthearted tone, and how she never sincerely apologizes for her mistakes. Aisha asks Rudy to kick Linnea out, and perhaps sell her to the Boreas house. As Linnea is his friend, Rudy asks Aisha to forgive Linnea, which Aisha agrees to do for now. At bedtime, Rudy is feeling horny as he hasn't had sex for over 10 days. Roxy and Sylphie aren't available as they are on their period, and they have a rule that pregnant women can't have sex. and Eris isn't available either. Linnea invites him to have sex with her. Rudy considers it, but rejects Linnea. She tried this since she wanted to become Rudy's fourth wife, which would also erase her debt. Rudy is concerned that if he has sex with Linnea, it would only worsen the current family dynamics. On top of that, he wanted to just be friends with Linnea. Rudy reflects on how several household members are unhappy since Linnea arrived. He considers that the reason Eris went to teach at the school was to escape the unpleasant atmosphere at home. So Rudy decides to find a non-maid job for Linnea. He considers various possibilities such as having her help Zenoba or Cliff's research, making her the merchant for selling the Super Tribe's book and doll sets, or making her Norn's maid, or an adventurer. He dismisses all those ideas as none seemed like a good fit, nor would they allow her to generate enough money to repay her debt. During lunch, Rudy discusses this with Cliff. Cliff suggests having Linnea help with work at Orsted's office. After thinking about it, Rudy comes up with a new job for Linnea, which is to recruit people to support his and Orsted's missions. He buys another building to make the new office, where Linnea would work. He gets Aisha to supervise Linnea, who reluctantly agrees. Rudy is then sent on a different mission by Orsted, and he completes his mission in 1 month. When he returns home, he finds out from Sylphie and Lilia that Aisha has been spending a lot of time with strange, shady-looking people wearing black cloaks. Sylphie directs him to the building where Aisha is, and Rudy goes to investigate. He goes inside the building and sees lots of people wearing black coats. There, Rudeus is brought to meet Aisha and Linnea, and he discovers that they are the leaders of this organization. Aisha tells Rudeus that in the month that he had been gone, Linnea was able to quickly recruit over 30 people to their organization. With so many members, Aisha sold the old building bought by Rudy and rented the current building. From Nanahoshi's recommendation, Aisha had all the members wear a single uniform, which ended up being the black coat with a yellow rat symbol sewed in to signify Grey Rat to build solidarity among the group. Next, Aisha considered what they could do with all these new recruits. As most members had no talents except for combat, so they decided to form a mercenary company. This new business, under Aisha's careful direction, had many job requests for bodyguard work and generated lots of income. Rudy is extremely impressed with all that Aisha has accomplished within a short time span. He notes that with this, it could be possible for Linnea to repay her debt. Aisha reveals that a major part of her motivation for managing Linnea's new business was to make sure Linnea didn't fail and end up back at their home. The name of this company is Ruquag's Mercenary Company, with Ruquag being Rudeus's pseudonym. It has 50 current employees and is a branch company of Orsted Corp. As Rudy heads back home, Linnea tells Rudy that she received a letter from the Great Forest. The letter says that the Holy Beast has disappeared, and so Rudy decides to go to the Great Forest to apologize for being the one responsible for the Holy Beast's disappearance. So Rudy goes to the Doldia village to explain the situation of the Sacred Beast, and he's accompanied by Linnea and Sacred Beast Leo. They use Perugius's teleportation circles to get to the Great Forest. On arrival, they discover that it's rainy season, and the forest is submerged in over 5 m of water. Rudy makes a boat, and they make it to the Doldia village after a few days. Once they arrive, the villagers are surprised to see their sacred beast. They also recognize Linnea, who is Gaius's daughter. They shame Linnea for abandoning her duty to the village to become a merchant. Rudy goes to meet Gaius, who is now the village chief. Rudy notes that Gaius is much calmer now, compared to when they last met 10 years ago. Gaius is accompanied by Minitona and Terusena, who are hot-headed and remind Rudy of Gaius's old self. Rudy explains his situation, about how he is fighting a powerful enemy and summoned a being to protect his family, and Sacred Beast Leo ended up being summoned. Leo himself is able to communicate with the beast race, and so explains that Rudy's daughter Lara is special. It is revealed that Leo's purpose in life is to assist the person who will save the world. Leo believes that this person is Lara. Gaius expresses his surprise since he wasn't expecting this special person to appear for another 80 years. A possible explanation offered is that since Lara is half human and half elven, she will have a long lifespan, and so may need protection 80 years into the future. Gaius ultimately accepts Sacred Beast Leo's decision to live with Rudy and guard his family. He asks Rudy to bring Lara to the Doldia village for a ritual when she turns 15 years old. The conversation then shifts to the reason for Linnea living with Rudy. Linnea initially tries to lie, but Rudeus tells the truth about how she was scammed as a merchant, fell into debt, sold into slavery, and was ultimately bought by Rudy. Gaius then discusses who will go back with Rudy to help guard Sacred Beast Leo. Although Leo is unlikely to require protection, it is the Darudia tribe's duty to do so. Before any decision is made, Rudy asks about where Persena is. so he is brought to the prison, where Persena is currently being held. So Persena was actually performing a guard duty, but she gave in to her hunger, and she ate the meat that she was supposed to protect, and as a result, she was put into prison. Later, Rudy talks with her and Gaius, and they decide that Persena will become Sacred Beast caretaker for 10 years instead of staying in prison. So when Rudy, Linnea, and Sacred Beast Leo leaves the village, Persena also comes with them. After returning from the Darudia village, Rudy wakes up early to do his normal training. He notes his family is sleeping peacefully. He sees that Persena slept in Eris's bed last night, where she was Eris's hug pillow, and so she complains of pain in her breasts and ribs. At breakfast, Norn discusses with the family what she wants to do when she graduates. She considers becoming an adventurer. Her family members don't forbid her from pursuing this, but express their concern. Then Rudy goes to see Orsted and reports on his past month's activities. He tells him about his new mercenary company, and also brings up the fact that Lara may be the savior. Orsted notes that in other timelines, the partner of the Sacred Beast was male, and that he defeated demon god Laplace when he revived. However, Orsted did note that Hitogami spent a lot of effort to prevent Rudy's and Roxy's fates from intertwining. Rudy speculates that perhaps his daughter has taken the original hero's place as the savior, and Orsted concludes that Lara will likely be a major obstacle for Hitogami in the future. Rudy then goes to school to meet Cliff and Zenoba, and he sees them arguing with each other. Zenoba reveals that he has received a royal command to return back to his home country. His brother Pax succeeded in a coup, executed his father and brothers, and took the throne. So after the civil war, there is a high chance that other countries might invade Chiron. Therefore, Zenoba received a royal command to return to his country and assist in defending it. Hearing this, Rudy realizes that this is likely to be his next fight, and that it has come earlier than he predicted. Zenoba explains the situation to Cliff, Rudy, Elise, Julie, and Ginger. He reveals that his brother Pax was exiled to the kingdom of the Dragon King, but Pax somehow gained their backing and successfully initiated a coup in Chiron. He killed the previous Chironi king and the rest of the royal family, and became the new king of Chironi Kingdom. As a result of the coup, Chiron's military force has declined, and they worry that the countries to the north will take advantage of the situation and attack Chiron. Therefore, Zenoba was summoned by King Pax to return to Chiron to defend his home nation. Cliff and Rudy question Zenoba on why he wants to comply with the summon and return home. They warn him that this is likely a trap for Pax to have Zenoba killed. Zenoba admits he doesn't want to work under Pax. However, Zenoba reflects on how, due to his lack of control over his own strength, he has ripped the heads off of several people, including his former wife, which precipitated a civil war. But despite all this, he was not punished. Zenoba therefore feels that he owes his country in return. Zenoba feels that he was spared punishment so that he could save his country in times of crisis. But he also acknowledges the fact that if he returns, one way or another, he will likely get killed. Rudy doesn't want his friend to die, so he announces that he will be accompanying Zenoba to the kingdom of Chironi. So Rudy discusses this situation with Orsted, and Orsted reveals that in his timeline, 30 years into the future, Pax started a coup and took over the throne of his kingdom. He then began questioning his own kingship, so he vacated the throne and reorganized the kingdom into a republic. Then the Chironi Republic became a major world power and was a major hindrance to Hitogami. Orsted also warns him that Zenoba being summoned back is likely bait to draw in and kill both Rudy and Zenoba. Orsted wonders if someone in the kingdom of Dragon King may be Hitogami's apostle, so Orsted announces that he will go to the kingdom of Dragon King to investigate for apostles, while Rudy goes to Chiron to help Zenoba, despite it being a trap. Orsted also tells Rudy to avoid killing Pax, even if he's an apostle, as if he's killed Chironi cannot become a republic in the future. So Rudy then tells his family that he will go to Chironi, but Lara then starts crying and Roxy sees this as a sign, and she decides to accompany Rudy to Chironi. When Roxy announces this, Lara instantly stops crying. Rudy reveals to them that going to Chironi is likely a trap set by Hitogami, but Roxy still insists on going. So Rudy and Zenoba prepare their combat equipment before going to Chiron. Rudy brings both his bulky magic armor Mark I and the more manageable magic armor Mark II, as well as the shotgun cannon. Then they go to Sky Castle to borrow Perugius's magic teleportation circles. Zenoba explains to Perugius his situation and why he is heading back to Chironi. But Perugius also tries to convince Zenoba not to go back to Chironi, as he doesn't want Zenoba to die, because Perugius enjoys Zenoba's company and their chats about art. Zenoba asks to borrow Perugius's magic teleportation circles, He also begs Perugius to temporarily lift the rule that bans all magic races from entering the Sky Castle, and to allow Roxy to enter Sky Castle, so that she may also use the magic teleportation circles. Perugius reluctantly agrees, under the condition that Roxy does not speak and does not touch anything. Ginger goes ahead of the group to investigate Shiron Kingdom. She discovers that King Pax has 10 knights from the kingdom of Dragon King, and that one of them is the Death God, who is one of the 7 great world powers. So, the night before their departure, Orsted visits Rudy's house for an emergency meeting. Orsted gives his predictions based on Ginger's report regarding Pax's 10 knights. He states that 9 of them are likely weak. However, the 10th knight is likely Death God Randolph, who is ranked 5th of the 7 great world powers. The Death God has the ability Sword of Luring, which entices an enemy to attack when he should retreat, and Sword of Hesitation, which forces an enemy to retreat when he should attack. Orsted reassures Rudy that although he is a difficult opponent, Rudy should be able to handle him now that he understands his enemy's ability. In terms of the Death God's backstory, Orsted reveals that Randolph is the grandson of the second North God, and after beating the original Death God, he gained the title. He then was fed up with fighting and retired to become a chef in his hometown at Kingdom of Dragon King. He had no talent as a chef, and became buried in debt. He was then picked up by a general of Kingdom of Dragon King, and became a knight of the kingdom. So Rudy then says goodbye to his family, and Julie will also be living with Rudy's family, while Zenoba and Ginger are gone. So Rudy and Roxy then meet up with Zenoba at the city entrance. Cliff and Elise are there too, and they say their goodbyes. They go to Sky Castle and say goodbye to Nanahoshi. Then they use the magic teleportation circle and arrive in a teleportation ruin on the edge of Shironi Kingdom. From there it takes 5 days to journey to the capital. So when the group arrives in Shironi, they plan to have an audience with the king. Meanwhile, Rudy considers in his mind various outcomes from their meeting with the king, and considers how he will eventually get Zenoba to return. Roxy sees that Rudy is stressed and tells him to relax. So Rudeus and Zenoba have an audience with King Pax. Pax questions them on how they arrived in Shironi so quickly, but he doesn't pursue the matter when Zenoba refuses to give a clear answer. Pax also questions why Rudy is present. Pax wonders out loud if Rudeus is there to kill him, but Zenoba denies this. Pax introduces Death God Randolph, and Randolph introduces himself. He explains that his main job is killing, but that his hobby is cooking, and that he's a nice guy. Pax asks Zenoba if they should let Rudy and Randolph fight to see who is stronger. So after hearing this, Rudy readies himself for a fight, but Pax then diffuses the situation as he says he was joking. Pax says he no longer holds a grudge against Zenoba and Rudy. He recounts how he was sent to the Kingdom of Dragon King. While there, Pax worked on improving himself, developing his magic and physique. Pax then gained the attention of the king and was offered a reward. Pax asked for permission to marry the 18th Princess Benedict King Dragon. The king gives permission, under the condition that Pax return to Chiron, attain a high-ranking role, and then have Chiron send another prince as an exchange. But the Chironi kingdom refused to this, and this enraged the Dragon King, who sent Death God Randolph and the Order of Black Knights, with Pax to initiate a coup. They murdered the rest of the royal family, and installed Pax on the throne. So back in the present day, Zenoba asks why he was summoned if Pax has access to the Death God. Pax responds that the Death God is a loan from the Dragon King. Then Pax reassures Zenoba that he has no plans to exact revenge on Zenoba, and asks Zenoba to lend his strength, and Zenoba accepts his request. Pax then gives Zenoba command over Fort Karen and tells him to stop the northern invasion. So Zenoba and Rudy then leave the audience room. Zenoba feels that Pax has changed, but Rudy jokes that Pax may be manipulated by an evil god. Zenoba therefore asks if Rudy is referring to the evil god he is fighting against. Zenoba refers to the dinner they had with Cliff, where Rudy revealed that he was working with Orsted to fight Hitogami. Zenoba thought it was a joke at the time, but with Cliff working on an anti-curse device for Orsted and all of Rudy's missions, Zenoba started to wonder if the evil god may be real. So Rudy then reveals the truth about Hitogami, and how Pax may be manipulated by Hitogami, and that Rudy is forbidden from killing Pax. So Zenoba understands the situation and announces that he will try to protect Pax from Hitogami. On the other hand, Rudeus worries whether this is a trap, and if not, whether Pax may change his mind and try to kill Zenoba. So Rudy thinks to himself that he will discuss this with Roxy tomorrow. So Rudy discusses with Roxy all his worries and concerns, such as the fact that he is suspicious of the king of the Kingdom of Dragon King, and that he is uncertain about Hitogami's intent. Roxy reveals that new information from Ginger has arrived. According to her, their force at Fort Karen is only staffed with 500 soldiers, while their enemy's force is nearly 5,000. However, given that Rudeus and Roxy are Emperor-ranked and King-ranked magicians respectively, each of them could theoretically hold off over 1,000 soldiers. They then debate on whether Pax intended their placement to be a trap, given that they are outnumbered. Rudy then considers his current hypothesis on the identities of Hitogami's 3 apostles. One is the king of the kingdom of Dragon King, and another is someone from the group attacking Fort Karen, but the third person is still unknown. They agree that going to Fort Karen is likely a trap, but they go anyway as they wish to save Zenoba, as they know that Zenoba will go regardless. Rudy relays to Zenoba the fact that Fort Karen has 500 soldiers against 5,000 attacking soldiers. Zenoba remains unworried, as he knows he has Rudeus and Roxy on his side, and each of them is worth at least 1,000 soldiers. He also points out that since they are defending a fort, they are in an advantageous position, as it typically takes forces 3 times an occupying force to storm a castle. Rudy warns that Zenoba is likely being used as a sacrificial pawn by Pax, but Zenoba remains undeterred. He is fine with the idea of being sacrificed, and continues to insist that fighting for his country is his duty. So Roxy, Rudeus, and Zenoba travel to Fort Karen, and Ginger remains in the capital city. During the journey, Rudy is anxious about the idea of entering a war, but neither Zenoba nor Roxy are bothered. After 9 days of travel, they reach Fort Karen. There, they meet Shironi Knight Garrick, the one currently in command of the fort. Zenoba informs Garrick that he will be taking over command, but given his inexperience, he will continue to rely on Garrick. Zenoba then gathers all the troops for a speech and introduction. Zenoba introduces himself as well as Rudy and Roxy. He highlights their incredible power and successfully raises his troops' morale. Rudy looks at him and is impressed with Zenoba's show of leadership. So Rudy and Zenoba go outside of Fort Karen to the locations where they expect to be attacked, and Rudy spends time modifying the terrain with earth magic and setting traps to make it difficult for their advancing enemies. Rudy assembles his magic armor, which is meant for close combat, and also he fortifies the fort. Meanwhile, Roxy teaches magic to the soldiers and other staff at the fort. He notes that while Roxy and Zenoba are popular, but they seem to be afraid of him and avoid him, which he suspects is due to the fact that he rearranged the battlefield so effortlessly. They have also received support from the Kingdom of Dragon King, not through reinforcements, but by sending supplies, which include food, such as rice. They receive news that the enemy troops will arrive in approximately 5 days, so they continue with their preparations. Roxy works on drawing magic circles which generate fire magic, meant for multiple soldiers to use. Rudy thinks to himself that he will have to kill in this war, and reflects on how he has killed others in the past, and it left a bad aftertaste. Rudy confesses to Roxy that he is reluctant to kill people. Roxy reveals that while she has never been in a war, she has no issue with killing others, based on her experience of adventuring. Meanwhile, Zenoba and a crew of 100 men had gone off on their own mission, which is apparently to kill or capture the enemy commander. Soon, the battle with the enemy begins. The enemy started using magic to try to fill in the trenches and traps that Rudy had built, but Rudy is able to easily counteract these attempts. The enemies then try to advance by building bridges over the traps, but the Fort Caron soldiers shoot fire attacks at the enemy, using magic circles. The enemy tries to protect their own troops and counteract the fire attacks with water magic of their own. However, because of this, Rudeus is able to see the origin of this water magic, and therefore the location of the magicians. He easily eliminates the enemy magicians, and with the enemy magicians gone, the Chiron forces are easily able to crush their enemies using magic, as the enemy no longer has a method to counteract magic. So the Chiron soldiers easily win the battle with minimal losses. Soon Zenoba then returns, and only 10 of his original 100 soldiers remain. However, they were successful in capturing the enemy's commander, who is a member of the enemy's royal family. With this, they hope to negotiate to end the war. Zenoba reveals that while they were within the enemy lines, he and his team were caught in Rudy's and Roxy's attacks, but Zenoba tells Rudy not to feel guilty about this, and that any blame lays solely on him. That evening, an assailant from the enemy came to try to rescue their royal family member, but Rudy was able to quickly stun the assailant and hand him over to the fort's soldiers. Rudy is worried that he will be attacked this night by the death god, but no attack ever comes. The next morning, Zenoba and Rudy interrogate their royal hostage. They learn that the northern enemy had been planning an attack on Shironi for some time, and the hostage denied any knowledge of Hitogami. Rudy wonders if maybe coming to Chiron wasn't a trap after all. and that Hitagami had nothing to do with this. 10 days later, the enemy nation offered a truce, and Fort Karen sends a message back to the capital about the victory, the hostage, and the possible truce. Soon Ginger arrives at Fort Karen, back from the capital. She reports that a local warlord Jade has risen up and launched a coup against King Pax in the name of 11th Prince Haruha Shironi. Jade launched an attack at this time because he hoped that the battle at Fort Karen would go poorly, forcing Pax to send the Death God, which would leave Pax vulnerable. This did not happen, but nevertheless, Jade felt that this was still the best time to attack. Zenoba announces that he will return to the capital to defend Pax. Ginger and Rudy are surprised, and they point out that Zenoba has finished his duty of protecting his country, and to return back to Sharia with them. Zenoba reveals that his main motivation isn't just to protect his country, but to also protect Pax, who is his younger brother. Hearing this, Rudy respects Zenoba's decision to remain in Shironi to protect Pax. Ginger strongly dislikes Pax, as he had kidnapped her family as hostages in the past. She accepts that she cannot change Zenoba's mind, but she asks Zenoba to promise not to die, even if Pax orders it. Rudy answers on Zenoba's behalf, and he promises to make sure Zenoba doesn't die. So Rudy, Zenoba, and Roxy travel back to the Shironi capital city. Rudy wears his magic armor Mark I on the trip, despite its magical power drain, so that he can avoid disassembling and reassembling the armor on the route. They reach the capital after 5 days. At the entrance to the royal castle, there were a large number of people, including soldiers, merchants, and adventurers. Zenoba suggests that they enter the castle by a secret passageway to avoid getting detected. He directs them to an underground passageway by the watermill. They travel through the underground passageway. The passageway is narrow, so Rudy swaps out the bulky but powerful Mark I armor for the more portable, but less powerful Mark II armor. They go to the end of the passageway and open a metal door, whereupon they find a dead end. Roxy suggests that the passageway may have been sealed by an earthquake, or intentionally by Jade's forces. So Rudy uses earth magic to tunnel through. They then find themselves in a cave, which Roxy identifies as being similar to a labyrinth. At Roxy's advice, Rudy keeps digging a path until they reach another passage. They follow this passage until they find themselves in the room in the castle where Rudy was imprisoned many years ago, and where Zenoba and Rudy first met. So, they search the castle floor by floor, but see no one. Not a single person. They eventually reach the king's room on the 5th floor, and they see the death god Randolph guarding the room. Randolph is sitting on a chair and looking relaxed. He comments how having a room on the 5th floor is inconvenient, and how if he were king, his room would be on the 1st floor. Zenoba asks about the state of the castle, so Randolph reveals a red eye with 6 stars under his eye patch, and states that he used his eye to construct a barrier around the castle to protect the king, and everyone else who isn't dead has fled the castle. Zenoba tries to enter the king's room, but the death god Randolph refuses to let him pass, stating that he was ordered by the king to let no one pass. Zenoba tries to force himself through, but Randolph easily pushes Zenoba away. Rudy tries to defuse the situation, but he notes to himself that since both Randolph and their side are trying to protect Pax, they shouldn't be enemies. So Rudy thinks to himself that it would be a different matter if Randolph was Hitagami's apostle, but he feels that this is unlikely, since if this was the case, Pax would be dead already. However, just to be sure, Rudy asks Randolph if he knows of Hitagami. Randolph laughs and confirms that he does. Rudy now considers Randolph to be his enemy and prepares himself for combat. In response, Randolph draws his sword, which emits a green light, and Rudeus muses to himself that he is only wearing the Mark II armor. Rudy, Roxy, and Zenoba fight the death god Randolph. They initially land a series of blows, and although Randolph initially pretends to be hurt, he shrugs them off. He lands a significant blow on Roxy, which she only survived due to one-time use of magic items. Rudy recognizes that this battle is not winnable and instructs Roxy and Zenoba to retreat. Rudy asks Randolph what instructions he's received from Hitagami. Randolph reveals that while he has heard of Hitagami, he has never actually spoken to him. Rudy realizes that he has misjudged, and they apologize to each other for fighting. Randolph states that King Pax's ritual has now ended, and so they may enter to meet him. They enter Pax's room. They see Pax's wife, Benedict, laying in the bed, and they can smell the scent of recent sex, while Pax is standing on the balcony. Zenoba announces he is here to help, and that they may retreat to Fort Karen, but Pax rejects this idea. He monologues about how he had tried his best to be a good king, and as evidenced by the current rebellion, his subjects still do not support him. Pax reflects on how none of his efforts are ever rewarded. He recounts how when he was learning magic under Roxy, he excitedly showed her how he mastered intermediate magic, and Roxy only sighed. Pax reveals that this was particularly devastating for him as he greatly respected Roxy, and felt she was the only one to give him attention. And still his efforts were not recognized. Pax feels like a failure. The king of Dragon Kingdom gave him Sharon Kingdom, but he is ultimately not recognized as king by its people. So suddenly Pax jumps off the balcony and they try to catch him, but he hits the ground and dies. Pax had committed suicide. Rudy and Zenoba are shocked at the sudden turn of events. Zenoba wonders if Pax's death was Hitogami's doing, and Rudy admits that it is possible. Rudy plans to cremate Pax's corpse, but Zenoba wants to bring Pax's body to the rebels so that the revolt could conclude. They see that Randolph is carrying Benedict on his back. Randolph was aware of Pax's plan for suicide. He was instructed to then bring his wife Benedict back to the kingdom of the Dragon King. So as a group, they all travel back through the secret passageway. They see the Mark I magic armor on the other end. Randolph notes that if Rudy had used this armor, Randolph would have been in trouble. He further notes that contrary to Rudy's assessment, Randolph was actually becoming worn down from their attacks. Rudy wonders if maybe they could have won if they didn't second-guess themselves, but decides it doesn't matter because the correct choice would have been to avoid fighting in the first place. Rudy questions Randolph on how he knows Hitogami. Randolph reports that he heard a story from one of his relatives. So in order to protect his fiancée, Bodigadi stole the fighting god armor at the suggestion of Hitogami and fought Dragon God Laplace. In the end, he failed to protect the fiancée, and the two struck one another down. Although Randolph feels this story is a myth, it is through this story that he has heard of Hitogami. Rudy thinks to himself that he has heard the story of how the fighting god and Dragon King had fought from both Kirishika and Orsted, but he also finds it strange that someone as light-hearted as Bodigadi would do something like this. Randolph then indicates that he will return to the kingdom of the Dragon King, and when Benedict gives birth, Randolph will then raise the child, so Randolph then parts ways with the group, while carrying Benedict. So the rebels have taken over the castle, and are celebrating their victory. Pax's corpse is displayed in the town square, and most people are indifferent, as Pax's reign was short, and he was neither hated nor loved. Seeing his dead brother's corpse, Zenoba is quite emotional. Rudy wonders if he should have cremated Pax after all. Rudy can see in Zenoba's face that he did indeed care for Pax. Rudy ruminates on how he should have been able to save Pax, and he wonders if Jade, the leader of the rebels, was actually Hitogami's apostle. Rudy thinks to himself that it doesn't matter now, and that all their efforts have been for nothing. Roxy is depressed, now knowing how her failure to be encouraging as a teacher had a major negative impact on Pax. She admits to Rudy that she did indeed ignored him when Pax showed how he mastered intermediate magic. She admits she may have been comparing Pax to Rudy, who was naturally gifted at magic. While she recognized she didn't do a great job as a teacher, she blamed it on the environment at the royal palace at the time. She didn't realize how her attitude had such an effect on Pax until he mentioned it just before his death. Roxy starts crying and she asks Rudeus how she can continue to be a teacher. Rudy comforts her, and he reassures her that she will learn from her mistakes and will continue to improve as a teacher. He further states how Roxy had a major positive impact on his life as his teacher and greatly contributed to his personal growth. Rudy doesn't try to minimize the harm that Roxy had inflicted on Pax, but encourages her to learn from her mistakes and to think of all the future students she may help, students such as himself. Soon, Ginger meets up with the group in the capital city. Ginger asks what Zenoba's plans are going forward. Zenoba states that he plans to go back to Sharia, and Ginger is happy to hear this. Zenoba indicates that he will renounce his position as part of the royal family, but Ginger still plans to continue to serve Zenoba to fulfill her promise to Zenoba's mother. She doesn't care that Zenoba will no longer be royalty. Hearing this, Zenoba is reluctant, but Ginger continues to insist. So Zenoba agrees for Ginger to continue to follow him. So Zenoba, Roxy, and Rudy set off to return to Sharia. They go to the teleportation magic circle, which brings them to Sky Castle. Zenoba and Rudy greet Perugius and give an update on the events that occurred in Shirone. Perugius admonishes Zenoba for thinking of binding himself to a single country, and he is happy to hear that Zenoba had renounced his royal status. Soon they return to Sharia, and Rudy goes to meet Orsted to give him a report as well. So Rudy reports on the events in Shirone. He confesses to Orsted that he failed to prevent Pax's death. Orsted postulates that the king of Dragon Kingdom, Leonard King Dragon, was an apostle of Hitogami, and that the warlord Jade, or a Shiron kingdom general, was also an apostle. By manipulating these people, Hitogami cornered Pax and drove him to suicide. Hitogami likely manipulated the Dragon Kingdom's king to assist Pax with claiming the throne, providing him the death god, and putting the country in a good position, and then manipulated Jade to orchestrate Pax's failure. So Rudy apologizes for his failure, and Orsted acknowledges that he made a mistake as well. After killing Leonard Kingdragon, he acknowledges he should have gone to Shironi Kingdom. Rudy then wonders if someone could substitute for Pax in turning Shiron into a republic, but Orsted states there is no substitute. Zenoba, who is standing behind Rudy, expresses his gratitude to Orsted. Zenoba wonders if Orsted was trying to help Pax. Orsted reveals that he wasn't necessarily trying to help Pax, but rather he needed a man who would have been born in the country Pax would have created. Zenoba asks Orsted to explain. Orsted explains that Pax would turn Shiron into a republic. After becoming a republic, Bolt Macedonius, a former slave trader, rises to power and is given an important post by Pax. From his descendants, the demon god Laplace is born. Now that Pax has died, Orsted no longer knows where Laplace will be born. Orsted states that Laplace must be killed in order to reach Hitogami. But while he can kill Laplace with his own power, this will consume too much of his magic power before his fight with Hitogami. Orsted says he is near the end of his loop, before he is forcefully reincarnated, and so he doesn't have enough time after killing Laplace for his magic power to replenish. So Orsted announces that this loop is already a complete failure just like the previous ones. But Zenoba suggests that this loop may not actually be a failure yet. He suggests that they start gathering an army that can defeat Laplace, so that Orsted can save his magic power. Laplace won't revive for approximately another 80 years, so they have time to gather allies. Now Zenoba wants revenge on Hitogami, who killed his brother. Zenoba asks if Orsted would accept him as another subordinate. Rudy supports Zenoba's idea, and Orsted accepts Zenoba's plan to gather allies and accepts him as another subordinate. Later, Rudy heads back to his home, and Zenoba goes there as well to pick up Julie. At home, Rudy sees Eris practicing her sword swings. He worries that she is overexerting herself as a pregnant lady. But Eris tells Rudy that she actually gave birth to a baby boy 10 days ago. Rudy has mixed feelings about this. While happy that Eris gave birth to a healthy baby boy, he is disappointed that he missed the delivery. Soon Julie and Zenoba have a happy and emotional reunion, and then they leave. Rudy also has a happy and emotional reunion with the rest of his family. He meets his newborn son, who they named Ars Grey Rat. Then Rudy tells his whole family about Hitogami, and how he and Orsted are fighting Hitogami. He tells his family that Lara might be the savior, why he cooperates with Orsted, and all the other details. The whole family nods in support, and Rudy feels refreshed after revealing one of his secrets. The only secret Rudy now holds is that he is reincarnated from another world. So if you guys enjoyed this video, then make sure to like the video and get subscribed to the channel for more videos like this.